Second stimulus bill. What do you need to know? By the way, we have a special guest.
I am so excited for this show, Brian. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Just holiday recording schedule craziness. I'm kind of stepping in for Bo today, and I'm going to be kind of handing Brian some questions. So he's got a lot of great content on this stimulus bill first, but if you have a question just on personal finance or on the stimulus package, let us know in the chat.
So here's the thing. Guys, how in the world does our government think that you release a document yesterday and then approve it, I think around 11:30ish last night, but it was 5,500 pages. I want to personally thank some of the road warriors that are out there just going through the thousands of pages, trying to put out summaries. There's a lot of great resources. I find myself, I'm on Twitter looking at Jeff Levine all the time. Guys, there's just so much here. We're going to try to pack a lot of this in here. Just realize, though, it's hard, though, to turn 5,500 pages into two. So we've tried to give you the highlights, brush with broad strokes, so you know exactly what to kind of expect and how to kind of plan as we quickly approach the close of 2020.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's interesting stuff.
So let me give you some broad overview things. First of all, this total package, $2.3 trillion with $900 billion for coronavirus relief and $1.4 trillion to fund the government through the next fiscal year. I think that they've gotten to the point now, if y'all remember a few years ago, we were taking it to the edge of the cliff every year with the funding of the government. Now they've started, throwing whenever they have key legislation, they kind of throw some extra funding in there to give them a little more margin. So hopefully they don't take us to the cliff like they've done in the past. Just picking on the government a little bit, I don't think it's ideal to kind of drop legislation and then pass it in the same day, especially when it's 5,500 pages.
Yeah,
because
it seems like a lot.
It doesn't give us nerdy people like us time to go through. I don't even think it gives the lawmakers enough time to go through it. So that's less than ideal. It's kind of, I guess you call it if you think about it, putting it back on school terms, teacher giving you a huge exam and not giving you the material until the day of. Nobody would be expected to do that. But somehow, that's what we do with our government.
Here we are.
So here we are. So let me go through the highlights. I think the first thing, the majority of you are probably tuning in to find out what's going on with stimulus checks part 2. So here's what we know about this. It's somewhat similar to the first stimulus checks in the fact that the phase outs are at $75,000 for single people, $150,000 for married, and then head of household is $112,500. That sounds okay. And by the way, this is based off of 2019 income. Remember, in the past, they had some flexibility, 2018, 2019. This year, they're basing it off 2019. But remember, it's ultimately a 2020 tax credit. So what does this mean for you? First of all, if you had a good 2020, you're the oddball. You had a good 2020, but a bad 2019, you're going to be happy they based it off of 2019. If you had a really strong 2019, but your 2020 has gone south, let's just leave it at that, you're not going to get the stimulus directly deposited as quickly as the Treasury Secretary and others have talked, but you'll pick it up when you actually get your tax return done. So let's go into the details a little bit. I thought there was some unique things here that were a little different. If you want to go ahead and pull up, give me a few clicks on what about the stimulus checks.
Yeah, this is just a flow chart that FTE Daniel made us that's kind of helping you understand, like, okay, if you made less than $75K or $150K if you're married filing jointly, you will receive the full recovery rebate.
I thought it was interesting. This next slide shows the phase outs are a little different. For a single person, on the first stimulus checks, it was 75 to 99. Now it's 75 to 87. Because remember, once you're in that phase out, you lose $5 for every $100 you make. For married couples, it phased out originally on stimulus part 1. It was 150 to 199. Now it's 150 to 174. Yeah. So they actually squeezed that in a little bit. So pay attention to those phase outs. And then I thought it was interesting. Like I said, if you made good money in 2020, you're going to be glad they based it off 2019. If you made a lot of money in 2019 but not so well in 2020, you'll pick it up later if you made too much money in 2019. Here's what's different about it. Y'all remember the first one. Let me tell you, compare and contrast. First one, $1,200 for the taxpayer and their spouse, and then $500 for the kiddos.
Right.
They threw all that out the window. They're like, no, that kind of got a little complicated. So here's what they did this time. They just said $600 for you, $600 for you, $600 for you. It doesn't matter if you're a kid, man, woman, taxpayer,
just across the board,
spouse.
$600.
It's $600. Here's the only curveballs that they have. The kiddos only count if they're qualified for the child tax credits. So what this does, it cuts out the higher teenagers, the early college kids. So those might be in no person land and won't be counted. But if you've got younger kids, they're going to be $600. You're going to be $600. Your spouse is going to be $600. That all plays out pretty much. And they think they're going to send this money out quickly. I mean, I even heard reports that they're going to try to do direct deposits as soon as next week.
I know. I feel like we should take bets.
Yeah, it might be. That sounds a little aggressive, but it's out there. So that's what's going on with the stimulus checks. So $600 for you, your wife, your husband, your spouse, as well as the kiddos. It's all coming in the next few weeks. Let's talk about federal unemployment benefits. You know, in the first time around, they gave everybody, well, anybody who's unemployed, $600 a week on top of your state benefit. Yeah. That has changed. It's now $300 on top of the state benefit, and it kicks in starting December 26th. It did not go backwards, did not go retro, because there's kind of been a gap here where if you've been unemployed, you lost those additional federal benefits, and you've probably just been doing without. They've kind of reset that starting December 26th, so pay attention to that. Daniel put something in here for our creative folks. He said, I'm just going to read what Daniel wrote in here. He said, for some mixed earners, those who classified as employees, freelancers, contractors, they'll be eligible to receive $100 a week. So if you're, somebody like I see freelancer, I think creative, but it's actually also just normal contractor, somebody who's kind of paid as an independent contractor. You might have more options. Pay attention to that. Let's get to the part if you're a small business owner. $325 billion is earmarked for business relief, including $275 billion for Payroll Protection Program Part 2.
It's back.
It is. Now,
Part 2.
So just to give you guys some compare and contrast on this from the first time, the first PPP program was $349 billion. That wasn't enough. So they came back to the well and got another $320 billion. So it was a total of $669 billion. I wrote million in my notes like a knucklehead.
I saw that. I was like,
it's billion.
It's a billion.
So it's one of those things where this is a smaller program, and there's some weirdness. Did you have to do the first one to get the second one? All that's going to be, it's kind of muddied up right now. We're working through that. But before I talked about the new plan, let me give some clarification for those that did the PPP under the first program, the CARES Act, is that, first, this is going to be good news. There is going to not be a 1099 for PPP forgiveness. So remember, these were loans, just for you guys who aren't familiar. The Payroll Protection Program was something small businesses could apply for that they could use originally for payroll, rent, utilities, things like that to cover your basic necessities of keeping people employed. If you used it for those purposes, you applied to the SBA for forgiveness, you could get that loan completely just wiped away. So there was a lot of people, this was controversial in some ways because they went after some of the bigger businesses that did it. But I know it was also a lifeblood for a lot of smaller businesses.
Right.
And I think it's also worth repeating, sharing that of the total numbers for the first PPP, close to 69% of the numbers, not the amount, but close to 69% of the numbers were for less than $50,000. So these were primarily small businesses. So that's a good thing. But when we fast forward and now look at Part 2, there's one more thing. They've also clarified that the original PPP money, if you used it for payroll and all the things it was supposed to, even though that loan's forgiven, they're going to let you deduct those expenses. That's a pretty big deal.
That's really nice.
Yeah, because think about it. You got this loan that was forgiven, wiped away. So it's essentially a grant from the government, but the government's also going to let you now deduct those expenses. That's a good thing. And it makes sense. I mean, look, I get that this is going to be a benefit for business owners, but there's a lot of small business owners that are still struggling, especially in accommodations and restaurants and so forth. Can you imagine now if all of a sudden they weren't able to deduct that $50,000? That'd probably be an additional $20,000 tax bill that they weren't prepared on top of a pretty cruddy
crazy
2020. So here's what's new in PPP. First of all, expanded qualifying expenses. Here's what they called it: covered operations expenses. When I saw that, I was like, what does that mean? They essentially wanted to give businesses the ability to get reimbursed for taking their business to the cloud, for allowing your employees to start working remotely. So whatever software, cloud services are things to help you deal with what's happened with COVID in this new modern world.
That is pretty awesome, because I think that's something that's not going to go away after this to a large degree.
I think a lot of businesses
used to doing
changed.
it now. Yeah.
The other thing, property damage costs. This is, man, we've 2020 on top of COVID. We've had social unrest. We've had buildings and cities that have been destroyed. So they built that into this because a lot of that stuff is not covered by insurance. I think a lot of people would be surprised if you read your insurance policy and you'll see that sometimes vandalism, acts of war, other just unique things are not covered. Government wrote that in. Now that stuff you could actually get covered under the new PPP. Supplier cost sounds exactly like it sounds. It's just supply of goods that are essential. Worker protection expenditures. If you have to go, you guys know we went to Vegas for we had some business stuff out there, and while we were there, we walked through some of the casinos. There's plexiglass everywhere. So I guess if you had a business that required plexiglass to keep your workers safe, as well as other protective things or rules or regulations, that would now fall under the worker protection expenditures that would be in the new expanded payroll protection. Here's the overview of the new PPP Part 2 is that instead of it originally being, I think, 500 employees, now it's 300 or fewer employees to qualify. You also, here you listen to this, you have to have show a 25% drop in revenue during any quarter in 2020. That's a little different than the original one. Still 2.5 times average monthly payroll, capped at, this is a big one, capped at $2 million versus $10 million. Realize, and I think that's probably a good thing because, like I said, the majority of the numbers, not the amount, were for true small businesses. But some of the bigger guys, if you look at where the actual money went, the largest group were checks that were, well, they still wouldn't be impacted. But let's look at this: $2 million to $5 million in the original PPP was approximately 14% of the money, and then $5 million greater was 6%. So if you added those two numbers, a little over 20% of the money of the original PPP went for those $2 million and greater. They're cutting that out. And that's probably okay because the PR departments of those companies were probably tired of dealing with the negativity anyway. So that's a big change. They did put a loophole in here, or I guess an expansion for the accommodations industry. That's where if you do anything that's in food services, accommodations, that type of field, you actually get to do 3.5 times monthly payroll. So they expanded that out a little bit, and you get, instead of counting 300 employees, you get to do 500 employees. Let me give you a few other things that were in the bill.
Yeah.
I'm going quick, I know, because we have to get through this.
Yeah, it's all right. But, I mean, there was a lot in there, so
5,500 pages. So here's the other stuff in the bill. This was a pet peeve of mine. There's two things that have always annoyed me about the tax code from a memorization standpoint, because you guys come to a CPA like me, you expect me to know all these cool stats, facts, and figures. Well, the government doesn't make that job easy because they flip and flop depending upon what tax year. One of those is medical expenses, deductible medical expenses on your itemized deductions. They have flopped between 7.5% of your adjusted gross income, meaning that you don't even get to deduct $1 until it exceeds over this percentage of your adjusted gross income. They've now made 7.5% permanent, whereas it has been flopping back and forth between 7.5% to 10%, depending upon the different tax years. I couldn't keep it straight. I know you couldn't keep it straight, so I'm glad to see they've made it right at 7.5% permanent, whatever that means. Forgiving of house debt. This all came back, if y'all remember, when we had the collapse of the real estate marketplace, 2008 through 2011. A lot of guys might not realize that if you walked away from a house and you had that debt forgiven, or wiped it off, you had to pay taxes. You got a double whammy on it. Not only were you broke, you lost your house, but you also had to pay income taxes on whatever debt was wiped away from your plate. Well, after the downturn or the real estate collapse, they actually made it in the tax code where now you would no longer pay taxes on that forgiven debt. They've extended that. That's through 2025. So they've taken that off. They've been just kicking the can every year. It's kind of getting old that they do this every year. So they actually kicked it out a little further. So it's 2025. Here's something that was interesting. Employers now have the opportunity, if they have employees that have student loan debt, you can give them, and I'm assuming deductible. That part was not completely clear to me, but $5,250 could be forgiven or given to the employee to just write off, to pay towards their student loans. So
wow.
I'm sitting here thinking, I might be having some conversations in January to any employees that have student loans and say, hey, do we want to talk about rediscussing your compensation where a portion of this ought to be going towards student loans directly? Because
interesting opportunity.
Well, I think the government recognizes, hey, because what does the government use as their carrot and stick approach? Is they use the tax code, and I think they know there's a lot of student loans out there, so this is their way to kind of address that. This one's big, guys. They know that there's a problem right now that restaurants don't have as many people going to see them. Not out of choice, and a lot of times it's just because in a lot of cities these things are closed down. So here's what they're trying to do: a kind of a stimulator for restaurants. In 2021, 2022, businesses can now deduct 100% of meals expenses. For you that don't know, that's typically only 50% deductible. And it almost got kicked out under the 2017 to be 2018 tax legislation. They had to fight to get even the 50% deductibility of meals, because entertainment disappeared. It was always meals and entertainment. Meals stuck around, but it was only 50%. This is a big deal because I think, if you're a sales rep or you're somebody who has to take people out or have meals, it's now going to be 100% deductible for the next 2 years. You can see why the government did that. They're trying to really give a kick towards restaurants to get y'all a little more stimulus. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to do it. Earned income credit as well as the enhanced child tax credit. Those are because they know 2020 was such an odd year for income. Because you're supposed to show some earned income to qualify for those credits. They're going to let you use 2019's income. That's pretty good. Here's one that I think everybody ought to pay attention to. It's not a huge deal, but it's nice what they're doing. I think they realize the government, once again, using that carrot and stick approach. They know charities are struggling during this time right now too. So just like in 2020, there's a $300 above the line charitable deduction, meaning you don't have to itemize. You can just everybody who files a tax return can take $300 off of their taxes. Now, here's what was weird in 2020, and they tried to fix with this new legislation. If you're a married tax return, $300. If you're a single tax return in 2020, $300. It didn't matter your filing differences. It will change in 2021. Because what they're going to do on this is it's now going to be $600 for married returns, $300 for single returns. So they kick that up. So pay attention. That's, by the way, we're at 12/22, December 22nd. Still have time to get those $300 contributions in for 2020. Just know in 2021 it's going to be boosted up. You don't have to itemize to count those deductions. Here's a big one also, and I know I keep saying big ones, but these are the things they're trying to fix.
Again, there was a lot in there.
A lot of you guys were caught in a weird place with your flexible spending accounts as well as your dependent care benefits, because you're doing the $5,000 so that your kids can go to daycare or a pre-K program or something like that. Well, guess what? All that stuff got canceled because of COVID, and you're like, oh my gosh, I got the money in there, and these plans are written where I don't have a ton of flexibility to get the money out once it's in there. And you are all panicking, what do we do? How do I get that money? Well, government has come in, Congress through this legislation. They're going to give you the ability to roll it into 2021, meaning you can spend the money that was put in 2020 in 2021. They also, here's a pretty smart thing they did. They also had the foresight to say, look, a lot of you guys have already made your elections for 2021. Because we know you've made your elections and it's hard to change that, we're going to give you the ability to now roll over 2021 to 2022 as well. So that's a pretty good kind of rescue moment there for a lot of you guys that might have those FSAs or dependent care benefits that you're getting a tax benefit off of. Just to kind of close this out before we start taking questions from you guys, there's also going to be additional money for transportation, schools, rental assistance, and vaccine distribution as we're trying to hopefully turn 2021 into the year that 2020 sure was not. And then here's the compromises, just because, look, this bill didn't do it all. There's a lot of criticism out there on it. I think the Democrats are pretty upset that this doesn't have the money to help the cities, the states, that they were trying to get some money in there to bail some of the states out and the cities. The Republicans are pretty upset because the business liability protection wasn't really covered in this. So every side gave up a little bit. I'm just glad to see some type of action. Still, picking on the government, less than ideal that you drop legislation, pass it, in less than a day later, and it's 5,500 pages, a little bit on the absurd, ridiculous side of things. But hey, this is how Washington works in the United States.
And here we are, stimulus bill. All right, so we do have some questions that got in there before our technical difficulties. So let's dive in. We have Bill Irvin. He said, I don't need the $600 stimulus check, which, congrats, that means that you are a financial mutant and you're probably doing pretty well. But he said, are there any tax-efficient ways of donating the money? I thought that was such a good question.
Well, because a lot of you guys, look, we all know most people don't get to itemize anymore because part of the new tax legislation that came out in 2017 and kicked in 2018 was the fact that they pushed up the standard deduction so much that most of you are not itemizing. So I tell you, typically in some of our year-end planning shows, we tell you to stack your charitable contributions so that you itemize one year, you don't itemize another year, use charitable gift funds. But here's something that's a little easier in 2020, now in 2021 as well. There's an above-the-line $300 per taxpayer in 2020, and then for married in 2021, because of this new legislation, $600. You can donate. It'll be fully deductible. So feel free to use cash or write a check to your favorite charity. If you are finding that you're a person that gives a much bigger portion of your assets and your annual income, we like charitable gift funds and other things that allow you to give appreciated holdings. And what I like about giving away appreciated holdings is that it's a double whammy in the fact that in a good way. And the fact that you never pay income taxes on the gains that are on those appreciated holdings, but you get 100% fair market value, meaning whatever the value was on the date that they were donated, as long as they were long-term assets, meaning you held them for 12 months, that is what your deduction is. So you might have bought something for $1,000. It's worth now $3,000. You get a tax deduction for $3,000 on your taxes, never paid income taxes on the $2,000. That's a pretty good situation for your charity. Also a great situation for you. If you're charitably minded, and I always like that, that's part of the abundance cycle, go beyond just what the Money Guy show is doing, you can be rewarded doing that strategy.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. And here's another one kind of about the stimulus as well from Peter. And it's really about this crazy economic time in general. He says, if you have to deplete your emergency savings, or okay, we say to have these emergency savings for an emergency, right? What if, you had to dip into those this year? Should you immediately stop doing retirement savings and build that back up? How does that kind of fall in fu, and what would your advice be if you did have to use emergency reserves?
Emergency reserves, when they're officially depleted, you're getting close to where, you typically keep 3 to 6 months, and now you're a month. Your 3 to 6 months is turning into a month. By all means, I love retirement savings, but part of financial order of operations is also keeping your life out of the ditch. This is a weird year. There's a reason we have legislation that's being hurried through twice in 1 year because these are unique times. Without a doubt. Even the way we're doing Christmas this year is unique for all of us. So I know that those this will hopefully be something we all work through. So I get it. If you have taken your emergency reserves down and you're out of money, yes, but it seems crazy to put something into a restricted account when you need it just to put food on the table for your family, to pay the mortgage payment. Investing is great, but it's usually that 15, 20, 25%, that 20, 25% goal is after you've covered some of the basic necessities of life. And that's why we've tried to build that into the first 3 steps of financial order of operations. Is think about it, it's deductibles covered. That's just making sure you have $2,000, $3,000, depending upon what your deductibles are. The employer match is just the free money. That's the only thing that I'd probably cringe that if I had to give up anything, it would probably be that 50 to 100% guaranteed rate of return if your employer does a matching program. And then the high interest debt. But some of that stuff seems a little hard when we're struggling so much. So I completely give you the grace, the flexibility, take care of your family, and then let's hope that through the stimulus as well as just an economic recovery, because I think there's going to be hopefully a lot of pent-up demand that unleashes in 2021, and hopefully better days are ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we take that financial order of operations very seriously, but we understand sometimes you have to like stop and go back. Step 1, deductibles covered. That's super important, and that's totally fine in this weird time. All right, here's an interesting one. From Sergio, he says, "Do I have to pay income taxes on these stimulus?"
Well, it's realize these stimulus checks are treated as credits. So no, they're not taxable to you. They're basically just advancing something. They were going to give, just like you have child tax credits, earned income credit, savers credits if your income's low enough. What the government does is that a credit is better than a deduction, because what a credit does is it actually lowers your tax paid. A deduction just lowers your income, and then you calculate the taxes. So typically a deduction is worth, depending upon your tax bracket, 15 to 30 cents on every dollar that they give you a deduction. A tax credit is worth $1 for $1. So it's really powerful stuff. So all they've done with these stimulus structures is they've said in 2020, and now, we're going to go ahead and give you a tax credit for, in round 1, the $1,200 a taxpayer, $500 for kids. Round 2, it's going to be $600 for all the qualifying people. Those are going to be calculations that just lowered your taxes due on your 2020 tax return. They're just going ahead and giving you that money on the front end so that it's not going to be taxable. And that's why I tell people, don't get stressed out if the check doesn't show up for you automatically because you made too much money in 2019. Because if you had a crushing bad year and you were below the income thresholds in 2020, you'll be made whole when you file your taxes.
Yeah.
So it's not taxable income.
Okay, I have a fun one for you next.
Okay.
This is from Joel Z. He says, "Is the Money Guy show planning to do an average net worth by age show? I thought that they did this every year."
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually ready to go with our annual net worth. And let me tell you, I'll go ahead and preview something for you guys. Every year we do this update. I love that it improves. And here's a sneak behind the curtain. We talk a lot about the concept of being a financial mutant because, we know our show's a little different because there's a lot of shows out there that focus on the 80% of the public that struggle with the basics of credit card debt and other things. We've always known we're a little different. We go deeper onto the investment, on the financial decision making of really that 20 to 25% that don't struggle with some of those basics. And I was like, when we were in the show prep this year on this net worth, so the short answer first, yes. We're doing an update. The second thing to let you see behind the curtain is we said, we need to give everybody, instead of just doing the median or the average, because we get those things, and believe me, we're going to give you some love too for y'all that want to talk about the difference between those two numbers. That's not who a financial mutant is. So this year we've made an effort to make sure you guys that are in the financial mutant class, you know what your fellow financial mutants are doing, so you can strive to reach that. That will be affirming for those that are doing. It'll be something that should motivate those of you who are working through the process.
Yeah. And so, yes, watch for that in early January. I won't tell you exactly when. Keep it a surprise, but we are working on it, and it's going to be really good. So That's for Joel. All right, want to do a couple more?
Yeah, let's do two more.
All right. Let's see. We have here's something about payroll protection.
Okay.
He says, do businesses that got, this is Reigns 485. Sorry, almost forgot to say that. Do businesses that got less than 150K in PPP round one have to apply for forgiveness? I heard there is a glare on the screen. I'm not sure
I don't know how Bo does it.
I just need to shout out to Bo. I don't know how you do it. Okay, and he said he heard that there was some talk about waiving the requirement for those businesses. Yeah. So asking for forgiveness for round one, and how does that affect round two?
I think that's a great question. Here's the thing. As far as I can tell from the new legislation, because a lot of people were very hopeful that while the legislators were together coming up with this, that they would find a way to kind of just broadly forgive those that were below a certain threshold. That didn't necessarily happen. What did happen was that they have told the SBA that they have to come up with a process that works better, where essentially they boil it down to a one-page form that they're working through that will make the forgiveness process even faster. So, no, it was not, as far as I can tell, I did not see an automatic sweeping forgiveness. But they have tried to streamline it. There's talk in the legislation of streamlining, but it was not just a broad wipe it away type thing, unfortunately. Yeah. But they are trying to streamline it. Matter of fact, there's even a provision in there where they gave the SBA like 10 days to work through some of the processes. I'm like, they realize Christmas is like Friday. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of crazy the way they did this legislation, but it is what it is.
Yep. All right, one more stimulus question from Blake Warren. He says, can you explain the $5,200 loan forgiveness more? Is that up to the employer?
Yes, that will be a decision by the employer. Here's, just because if you're trying to figure out a way to negotiate this with the employer. Now, look, like I said, this whole thing has been a rocket ship. This thing got approved, published, approved. So some of this stuff is probably going to be clarified, because here's the way legislation always works. We dealt with this with the CARES. We dealt this with the Secure Act and other things, is that the legislators get together, they pass the legislation, but then the IRS has to scramble around and actually turn this into forms, into actionable things. So there will be additional clarification that will be coming out in the months ahead. So I want to know, but on the rough end of what the legislation talks about is that it looks like your employer can choose to do up to $5,200. Was it $52? It was $5,250 actually, $5,250. If your employees have student loans, it's completely tax-free benefit for the employer to pay down that student loan debt. So here's what I think: if you were advocating to your employer, there's probably, the way this looks like it's written, if you take a portion of their compensation and use this $5,250, it's a win-win for everybody, because it's not going to be taxable to the employee. And then for you, the employer, there's going to be a benefit, assuming you get to continue to deduct the $5,250 that you made. You don't have to pay FICA taxes. You don't pay the Social Security and Medicare taxes on that $5,250. That's a really good situation for both the employer and the employee. So if you go to your employer and you know more about this than they do, because let's face it, and I don't think most people, even small business owners, are reading 5,500 pages. This could be something for you to go lobby to them. But I will tell you, the only word of caution is we're going to get more clarifying information on this. So I wouldn't immediately go start not using this as your opportunity to knock on the door and tell them about, if you're close friends or have a great relationship, float the idea, but then just keep them posted. But we do need to get this kind of tied down a little bit before I think you put a full court press on them.
Yeah. So lots of information.
Let's do one more.
Oh, really?
Do you have one? Did I put you on the spot?
No, give me 1 second. I can't find another. Let's see.
I felt like the technical difficulties, we ought to do one more just to kind of give a big thank you.
Yeah. So this is from Addison.
Okay.
She says, can you talk about claiming the stimulus claiming stimulus on 2020 taxes for college grads, and if filing independent affects things like FAFSA or healthcare? Can you speak to that at all?
Well, here's something I think is interesting, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer this for 2020 specifically, but part of this big stimulus, part of this new legislation, is that they are completely asking a redo of the student aid process. Because right
Oh,
now
okay.
that questionnaire is like 108 questions. I think they're trying to get that down below 40, somewhere in there. That's all written into it. I'll be honest. I'm not going to get in because there's so many nuanced differences that I'd have to see her specific situation before
Sure.
I give that advice. But I will tell you, legislators know that the student aid process is a disaster, so they have structured it in a way that they've written into this legislation. Get your act together. Let's structure it. I know that doesn't help her, but it's just to let you know the intent was with our legislators on it. So hopefully that helps. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have taken another question, but it's just one of those things you never know what's out there, especially when you get into tax law. It's so nuanced and has so many details. But I'm just glad to see progress is being made.
Yeah.
And that's really, I guess, if we're giving a gold star to at least close out 2020, such a unique, odd year. And I don't know. We're still in negotiations to see if we're going, or discussions to see, not really negotiations, if we're going to do another live stream. But I think this might be the last
I think
live
so.
stream
Yeah.
of 2020. We'll see that
That was
maybe.
the plan. So we'll see what happens next
But
week.
but I will tell you guys, if I don't, thank you. I mean, if I seem a little rattled this morning, it's just because I have the first cup of coffee I had was right here, sitting here with you guys, because going through this legislation, I felt the pressure to try to make sure you guys had actionable knowledge, because there's going to be so much going on out there in the world right now. I wanted to kind of boil this down, turn that 5,500 pages into 2 pages of actionable knowledge. So I just appreciate you going on this journey with me. I'm so excited. Remember, we are so close to 100,000. I think, and I've said this before, it's going to need a Christmas miracle to get us over 100,000. The reason, the big why we even have that ask is because once we cross 100,000, we know the YouTube algorithm treats us differently. We're no longer the little engine that could. We've now become a player in the content distribution marketplace. And we just want to continue to amplify our voice, because a lot of you guys will give us comments, how is this not a million subscriber show? Well, it's because you have to pay your respects with the algorithm, especially since we're not playing with slime or opening toys. You know, it's a little more unique,
Right.
nuanced thing with the audience that we appeal to. So just please tell your friends, your family, anybody you think could benefit. Please tell them, because we're trying to grow, so we can expand this platform. But I am just floored. We started this journey in 2006. I'm just so thankful. I mean, if you would have told Brian Preston, who was nerdily trying to play around with his iPod and podcasting, bought this book as my first entrance into that, I would have been blown away to know that this is what it would turn into. So thank you for being part of that journey. I get so sentimental during this time of year, and I just appreciate you guys being here for us. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, guys.
Money Guy team out.